Hello, I'm Ann Green, and welcome to We've Got Books. And boy, do we ever. We are coming to you from the big sky country of the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. I'll be your host for We've Got Books, and we're excited to connect with you. We delight in telling you about our books, as well as interviewing other Christian fiction writers about their books. Our goal is to introduce you to some great Christian fiction, to explore the books, and to have fun. We focus on getting to know authors and discover why we write books. We'll discuss fiction of different genres: suspense, romance, historical, mystery, women's fiction, and humor. Have you ever read a sensational book and wondered about the author? How the storyline was chosen and the plot envisioned, the characters created? We'll sit around the table chatting to get to know each author and how his book was created. So sit back and enjoy this delightful ride into the literary world. Today, I'm interviewing Julie McDonald Zander. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Julie. Maybe start with your background in writing.
Well, thank you, Anne, for having me on. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Larry. My background, I studied journalism and political science at the University of Washington. And then I worked for 10 years as a newspaper reporter and 9 years as an assistant city editor. And then when I edited the obituaries, I would say, oh, this person has a great story, but they had died and taken their stories with them. So I decided to start a business helping people capture and preserve their life stories for their future, for their family. And so Chapters of Life, I formed that. And since then, I have published more than 90 nonfiction individual memoirs, company histories, community histories, organizational histories, and 90 nonfiction books. And then I decided that I wanted a larger audience for a particular book, and I decided it was time to learn how to write fiction. So in addition to going to a lot of writers' conferences, I joined 2 Christian writing critique groups. So one meets once a week up in Centralia, and the other, I drive 200 miles round trip to go down to Melanie Dobson's critique group. She had an opening, and I said, sign me up. So it's great because I'm learning from people who know what they're doing. So, yeah. So, and then I've since published 4 fiction books through my St. Helens imprint, 2 of my own and then 2 for other people, other writers.
Wow. Well, driving that far each month is pure dedication. Sounds as if you've done a lot of writing. And you say you've written 4 books?
I've written 2 novels, and I published 2 other writers' novels, too, through my fiction imprint, which is St. Helens Press.
Oh, okay. Well, our listeners would love for you to tell us a bit about your personal life.
My personal life, I'm married. I have 2 grown children. We live in Southwest Washington. I also run the Southwest Washington Writers Conference, which is a secular conference, but since I was involved in Oregon Christian Writers for 20 years, a lot of our presenters are Christian writers because those are the people I know. Let's see, what else is there about my personal life? I like to read, I like to write. I've been doing a lot of presentations lately, learning about marketing, which I never used to have to do with my business. I would do books for other people, and they would market them or sell them or whatever. So,
okay. Somebody told me somewhere along the way that you have a Christmas tree farm.
Oh, yes. My husband has a Christmas tree farm. I do all the finance part and the signs, and he goes out there and tells, I help him during between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we have a lot of repeat customers. It's just a small Christmas tree farm. He calls it his exercise program.
That sounds great. I've never met a Christmas tree farmer, and it sounds lovely. I can almost smell the scent of fir trees. So, back to books. Do you write only fiction, or do you still write nonfiction?
I write both. I actually have been, since 2007, I've been writing a newspaper column once a week. So that's always nonfiction or kind of basically memoir. I help people write their life stories still, and companies, communities, and such. That's nonfiction. And then I've been doing a lot of fiction writing. I published my first novel in September of 2024, The Reluctant Pioneer, and it was inspired by a true story. And then I published the second one, Shattered Peace, A Century of Silence, in spring of 2025, and that also was inspired by a true story. So I have a lot of the historian in me, so I've done a lot of research on that. So I ground the stories in fact, but I'm learning to let the story tell itself. So my third one is based on family lore, so it's not inspired by real stuff, and it's really fun to just make it all up. I've never done that before.
Well, tell us more about your life.
About my life?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I like to write about a lot of local history, and my first novel was inspired by a local pioneer who I passed by her house all the time, where she lived, and she came across the Oregon Trail in 1847. I was a docent at the museum and for a field trip, and when I was walking the kids through the museum, I saw a little placard, and it told me a little bit about Matilda Kuntz, who crossed the Oregon Trail in 1847, and she suffered a horrendous tragedy. And I thought at the time, what would you do so far away from your family and your friends? How would you survive that? So between my personal history projects, I spent 5 years researching just exactly how she did survive that. And I debated about, I was a nonfiction writer, so I started putting together her book as a nonfiction, and my critique group at Writers Weekend at the beach said, oh, you need dialogue. And I thought, well, she died in 1901, so if I put dialogue into the book, it can't be called nonfiction anymore. And I debated whether to write it as a novel or whether to write it as nonfiction. And in 2019, I published it as a nonfiction book because her story had never been told. And we have a Washington State Park named after this woman, but her story had never been told. So Washington Territory's Grand Lady came out in 2019, but I still thought more people deserve to hear about this remarkable woman because she's just amazing. She's everything I'm not. She's kind, gentle, a great housekeeper, a wonderful cook, and she's just an inspiration that you can survive all things if you have the faith in God. So anyway, I decided to learn how to write fiction, and I wrote The Reluctant Pioneer based on her story. And it was very fun to try to be part of her along the journey. We retraced the Oregon Trail journey that she would have done in 1847. So it was an experience to get into her mind and to do that. So, and I was very honored that it won a silver Will Rogers medallion for inspirational fiction and American Book Fest 2025 Best Book Award for religious fiction. It was also a finalist for Western Writers of America Spur Awards Best Historical Novel and the Laramie Award. So that was pretty exciting for my debut novel. I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. So anyway, and my second novel is a dual timeline, which was a lot harder to write. Melanie Dobson writes a lot of dual timeline. So I had a contemporary piece and one piece that was from 100 years earlier based on true story. So, and it addressed some heavy topics like PTSD and things like that. So
today we're discussing your debut novel, The Reluctant Pioneer. So I think our listeners would like for you to read the back cover copy of The Reluctant Pioneer.
Okay. Matilda Kuntz cherishes her life as a wife and mother on a Missouri farm, but her hardworking husband wants to claim free farmland in the Pacific Northwest. When he suggests selling the farm to trek 2,000 miles across the Oregon Trail, she balks. But in the spring of 1847, Matilda and Nicholas Kuntz and their sons embark on a grueling journey westward. Fresh graves testify to dangers of disease, accidents, starvation, and a multitude of hazards threatening her family and her beloved's dream. With new struggles at every turn, Matilda wonders how she can protect her sons on such a perilous journey. Will they reach the trail's end? Will the babe growing inside her womb survive? When tragedy strikes, the question changes. How can she possibly continue? This pioneer woman's journey is inspired by a true story.
And it sounds like a really interesting story. So, what is the takeaway from the Reluctant Pioneer?
The takeaway is basically that you can survive, that God never abandons you, even in the hardest of times. And you can survive if you hold on to onto Him, because He'll carry you through everything.
So, what prompted you to write The Reluctant Pioneer?
Well, that was when I when I was at the museum and I saw that this woman had survived this horrible tragedy, and I didn't know at the time I was a mother with 2 young kids. I thought, how would you survive this so far away from family and friends and support? And so I wanted to find out, and I spent years going down to Portland to the Oregon Historical Society, going up to the Washington State Library. I scanned boxes of information and letters from her and her husband and such. So it was rather poignant. I had all these white gloves on, and I was scanning a diary written by her husband in 1847. And he was all excited about the Oregon Trail. And it's like, I got teary-eyed because I kind of knew what happened to this story when I did that. So, but it is a remarkable story. And her daughter later did donate land for one of the first Washington state parks. And it's called the Matilda Jackson State Park. So, for her mother.
Sounds like your research was a lot of fun. Our listeners enjoy hearing a reading from our spotlighted book. Would you like to read a portion?
Oh, sure. I'll read the prologue. I'll read the prologue because this actually was based on a newspaper article that I read from the 1800s. And so I wrote the prologue based on that. 1894, Chehalis, Washington. The reporter adjusted his suit jacket as he settled into a stuffed chair across from the diminutive and elderly pioneer. Mrs. Jackson, may I ask how long you have lived here on the prairie? The woman, her white hair tucked beneath a faded crimson floral bonnet, shifted in her rocker a moment before replying, It's been 46 years since I arrived. He nodded, and may I ask how old are you? Matilda Jackson pursed her lips. 84, I suppose. I imagine you've seen a lot of changes on the prairie during your lifetime, haven't you? The reporter asked as he jotted notes onto paper. I reckon I have. Matilda rubbed her hands over the worn black Bible in her lap. What year did you cross the trail? Summer of 47. How long did the journey take by wagon train? Let's see. The woman counted off the months on her fingers. We left in May from St. Charles, northwest of St. Louis, and arrived in Oregon City in November, so 6 months. Did you know you can cross the country in 6 days now in a railroad car? The reporter chuckled. Matilda nodded. That's what I've heard. Have you ever ridden on the railroad? She shook her head. I don't intend to. Have you ever seen the railroad? Once, my son drove the wagon over to Napavine to show me a train as it arrived. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and gazed at her. Tell me, was it really as dangerous on the Oregon Trail as they say? Matilda stared at him for a moment, then looked away as liquid filled her eyes. A lone tear escaped, trickling down her wrinkled cheek.
Well, that prologue certainly does invite one in to read the story. What are you working on now?
My third novel that I'm working on, it begins in 1847, same year, over in Ireland during the potato famine, and it's based on family lore. My father, when I did our family history interviews, he said his great-grandmother was left in Ireland when the family immigrated because she had one brown eye and one blue eye. And they were afraid that immigration wouldn't let the family in with her. And then she later came over with an aunt. Now, I don't think that, I checked the obituary, and I don't even know that story's even true. Because I read in her obituary that she came over when she was 5. So it might not be true, but it makes for a good story, and that's the one I'm working on now.
Okay, that's good to know. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with your readers? Do you have a newsletter, a webpage?
Yes, I do. I have I do have a newsletter. You can subscribe at my website, which is McDonaldzander.com, and I give people a pictorial following Matilda's path across the Oregon Trail, or a short story about participants in the Boston Tea Party. And if people are interested in interviewing their family members or anything like that, my other website, Chapters of Life, under Help for Historians, I have links to oral history questions and oral history tips so people can interview their own family members. Because the important thing is not writing a book, but getting those stories, capturing those stories. And anybody can do it. Your grandkids can interview you, your neighbor can interview you, but getting those stories is so priceless.
Well, thank you, Julie. This has been an educational as well as an exciting discussion. But once more, the time has sped by, so we must say goodbye from deep in the heart of Texas. We've hoped you've enjoyed your time with us as much as we enjoyed having you. And join us next week when we interview author Katrina Whitehead and the first book of her legal insanity series, The Caviar Caper. Listeners, we're so glad you joined us. Be sure to go to buzzsprout.com. That's buzzsprout.com. And listen to the 50 other podcasts on We've Got Books. You can find our podcasts on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast host. Or you can go to my website, AnneGreenAuthor.com. That's ANNEGREENE author.com, and click on the podcast tab. All our podcasts are short, fun, and introduce you to other authors and books. So, once again, we're going to say goodbye. This is Anne Green and Julie McDonald Zander saying goodbye for now. And read a good book for education, for a boost in your day, or just for pure fun. We hope you'll choose a book you learned about here on We've Got Books. See you next time.